My name is Eleanor, but people call me Ellie, and I'm 59. I never imagined that at this age, after everything I had endured and given, the sharpest wound would come from my own son. We were standing in his kitchen, voices tense over something so small it hardly mattered. Then he said it, "You're useless." Just 2 words, but they shattered me more than any hardship I'd faced as a widow raising him alone. I'd worked nights, skipped meals, and held myself together so he could have a chance at life. To him, in that moment, it meant nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply left, holding my silence like a shield. What he doesn't know is that I carry the keys to something that could change everything for him. And one day soon, those keys will matter more than he ever dreamed. I've always believed that our lives are stitched together by small, quiet moments, more than by the big, flashy ones people like to talk about. For me, the biggest moment of my life came in silence, standing in a hospital hallway at 30 years old, clutching a doctor's words I didn't want to hear. My husband, David, was gone. 1 heart attack, no warning, no goodbye. I was left with a 3-year-old boy who depended on me for everything. His name was Michael. Those first years were a blur of survival. I worked as a receptionist during the day and cleaned offices at night. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I learned how to stretch a single chicken into 3 dinners, how to patch shoes with glue, and how to smile even when my heart felt hollow. Michael was my reason to keep moving. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every school recital, I poured myself into being both mother and father. David had given me a gift just months before he passed, something so small, yet so enduring, a silver locket. Inside it was a tiny key, delicate and simple, resting against a miniature photo of the 3 of us. He told me, "This is a reminder, you hold the key to our home, our family, and to Michael's future." At the time, it sounded sentimental. But over the years, that locket became my anchor. Whenever I doubted myself, I'd hold it and remember his words. Michael grew up kind, thoughtful, and gentle, at least at first. He used to bring me flowers he picked from neighbors' yards, whispering, "For you, Mom." His little drawings always included me smiling, always at the center of his world. I thought the bond we shared was unbreakable, but somewhere along the way, things began to change. It started slowly, after he graduated college. Michael became more focused on appearances, on what people thought of him. He chased promotions, expensive suits, and cars he couldn't really afford. He still called me Mom with a smile, but his visits grew shorter, his patience thinner. When I offered advice, he'd wave it away as though my years of struggle taught me nothing about life. "Things are different now, Mom," he'd say. "You don't understand how the world works." I bit my tongue more times than I can count. I knew what pride sounded like, and I knew the sting of feeling like you didn't belong. His wife, Claire, only deepened the divide. She was elegant, polished, the kind of woman who measured people by the labels on their clothes. She never said anything cruel outright, but her glances carried more weight than words. When I stayed at their house, she'd sigh if I asked simple questions. She arranged the kitchen so neatly that I felt like an intruder every time I tried to cook. And though she never forbade me from visiting, I always sensed she counted the hours until I left. Around them, I often felt like an old piece of furniture, too heavy to throw away, but too outdated to truly belong. Michael didn't see it, or maybe he chose not to. Whenever I brought it up, he'd laugh lightly and say, "Oh, Mom, you're imagining things. Claire loves you." But love doesn't feel like a polite nod at the dinner table or whispered conversations when you leave the room. Through all this, I kept my own life simple. My house was modest, filled with secondhand furniture and photographs of Michael at every age. I had a small pension from years of work and a few savings bonds David had set aside before he passed. I wasn't rich, but I was comfortable enough. And in the back of my filing cabinet sat a manila envelope, edges frayed from age, containing old legal papers. Inside was the deed to a lakeside cabin I inherited from my parents. It wasn't much, a weathered little place with peeling paint and creaky floorboards, but it was mine. Michael knew about the cabin, though he never cared much for it. "It's falling apart, Mom," he'd once said. "You should sell it before it drags you down." But I couldn't. That cabin wasn't just wood and nails. It was summers spent chasing fireflies, winters wrapped in quilts by the fireplace, and the echo of my parents' laughter carried in the walls. Selling it would feel like selling a piece of myself. Still, I never flaunted what I had. I lived simply, quietly. The deed, the locket, my modest savings, they were my little secrets. I figured Michael didn't need to know the details. He had his own life, his own house, his own plans. At least, that's what I believed. But in his world of power suits and sleek cars, I became something he seemed embarrassed of. He'd cancel plans last minute or introduce me as my mom, she's retired, in a tone that sounded more like an apology than an introduction. Sometimes, when I sat in his living room while his colleagues dropped by, I could feel his discomfort, like my presence threatened the image he worked so hard to build. One evening, while folding laundry in my little house, I found myself holding the silver locket again. The tiny key inside glinted under the lamp. I thought about David's words, "You hold the key to Michael's future." I wondered if David had known somehow that a day would come when Michael would need me in ways neither of us could predict. Still, at that point, our relationship felt stretched thin, like a thread ready to snap. The argument where he called me useless didn't come out of nowhere. It was the culmination of years of distance, of unspoken resentment. I tried to hold on to patience, but the truth was, Michael saw me not as the woman who had built his life from scratch, but as an inconvenience he had to tolerate. And that realization, more than his sharp words, nearly broke me. Because deep down, I feared he was right. What use was I to a man who measured success in dollar signs and square footage? I was just his aging mother with a small pension and a cabin he considered worthless. Yet even as the tension grew unbearable, even as I walked out of his house that night with my dignity barely intact, I knew something he didn't. That locket around my neck, the papers in my cabinet, they were more powerful than he could ever imagine. And someday, those small, quiet things he overlooked might just change everything. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind of ordinary day that should have ended with nothing more than quiet dinners and routine goodnights. I had come to Michael's house to help watch the children while he and Claire ran errands earlier in the afternoon. I'd stayed to prepare a simple supper chicken casserole, the kind Michael used to ask for on his birthdays when he was little. When they returned, Michael went straight to his office. I heard drawers opening and closing, papers shuffling, his movements growing more frantic. Then his voice cut through the hallway. "Mom, did you move the folder that was on my desk?" I froze. I'd been in his office only to set down some laundry. A folder had been sitting at the edge of the desk, and I'd placed it neatly on the shelf to keep the kids from knocking it over. I told him this. His footsteps pounded against the floor as he came out, folder in hand, eyes blazing. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" That wasn't just some random paper. It was an important contract. I needed it exactly where I left it. I tried to explain, my voice calm but trembling, that I only moved it so it wouldn't get damaged. Claire stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching silently. The children peeked from behind her legs, sensing the tension. Michael's jaw tightened. He shook the folder in his hand like it was evidence of my crime. And then, without warning, he said it, "You're useless, Mom." 2 words, sharp, cold, and final. It felt like the air left my lungs. My ears rang, my cheeks burned, and for a moment I couldn't even move. I glanced at Claire, but she didn't say a word. She simply pressed her lips together as if agreeing silently. The children shifted uneasily, not fully understanding but recognizing cruelty when they heard it. I could have shouted back. I could have reminded him of the nights I worked double shifts, of the clothes I mended so he could look presentable at school, of the times I went without so he wouldn't have to. I couldn't. Instead, I set the casserole dish on the counter and removed my apron with steady hands. "Dinner's ready," I said quietly, though I knew no one would eat. I gathered my bag and walked toward the door. "Mom," he started, perhaps realizing what he had just said, but I didn't let him finish. I stepped out into the evening air, closing the door gently behind me. The walk to my car felt endless. My vision blurred, but I refused to let the tears fall until I was alone. By the time I reached my house, the tears had dried into something heavier, shame mixed with resolve. I sat on my couch in silence, the ticking of the clock loud in the room. Hours later, when the ache in my chest had dulled, I went to my bedroom closet. From the top shelf, I pulled down a small fireproof safe. Inside were my few important documents, birth certificates, savings bonds, insurance papers, and at the very bottom, a manila envelope. With careful hands, I lifted it out and slid the deed onto the table. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but still clear: my name, the description of the lakeside cabin, the signature of the notary who had sealed it decades ago. I traced the letters with my fingertip, remembering the summers spent there as a child, the smell of pine and lake water, the warmth of my parents' laughter. That cabin had survived storms, neglect, and years of disuse. And still, it remained mine. I sat staring at the deed for a long time, wondering why I had held on to it all these years. To Michael, it was worthless, a broken-down relic. But as I looked at it under the soft lamplight, something stirred in me. A sense that maybe, just maybe, this forgotten place still had a role to play in our lives. That night, I locked the deed back in the safe and closed it with a click. My heart was heavy, my dignity bruised, and my relationship with my son more fractured than ever. Yet, deep down, I couldn't shake the thought that this piece of paper might one day be the very thing he would need most. For now, though, all I felt was the sting of his words echoing in my mind: "You're useless." And I vowed not to return to his house again anytime soon. The weeks after the argument stretched out like a gray horizon, endless and heavy. Michael didn't call. Neither did Claire, not even the children, who sometimes slipped me little notes or drawings when I visited. The silence was its own message. They had closed their door, and I had promised myself not to go knocking. I filled the empty hours as best I could. I started knitting again, though my fingers weren't as nimble as they once were. I planted herbs in small pots on the windowsill, watching tiny green shoots push through the soil. I even joined a book club at the library, though I often found myself staring at the words without really seeing them. The truth was, every quiet evening reminded me of what I had lost, not just David, not just youth, but the closeness I once shared with Michael. One afternoon, while trimming roses in my front yard, my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, shuffled over with her cane. She was the kind of woman who always knew more than you thought possible. She leaned close and whispered, "Ellie, I heard your Michael might be in trouble with the bank. Word is, he's borrowed too much." I forced a smile, brushing the dirt from my gloves. "People talk," I said lightly, but my stomach tightened. Mrs. Patterson wasn't the type to invent stories. That evening, I couldn't shake her words. I made tea and sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. Michael had always lived larger than he could afford, but I assumed he had everything under control. Could it be true? Was he really drowning in debt? A few days later, I noticed something strange. While scrolling through an online marketplace, I stumbled upon listings from Claire's account. Designer handbags, shoes, even a gold bracelet I remembered Michael giving her one Christmas. At first I thought maybe she was simply decluttering, but the sheer number of items and their value suggested desperation rather than tidiness. The puzzle pieces began to arrange themselves in my mind, each one darker than the last. The final confirmation came from the lips of someone who never lied, my granddaughter, Lily. She's only 8, too young to understand the weight of secrets. During a rare phone call, she chirped happily about school, her new friend, and then added casually, "Daddy had visitors again." They were really loud. Mommy told us to go upstairs, but I heard them yelling about money. My heart sank. I wanted to press for details, but I held back. Children shouldn't be burdened with adult problems. Instead, I changed the subject, but her innocent words clung to me like burrs. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the locket resting in my palm. The tiny key inside pressed against the curve of my thumb. I opened the locket, stared at the miniature photograph of David, and whispered into the empty room, "What would you do?" I could almost hear his steady voice reminding me of all the times we'd faced hardship together. He would say to fight for family, no matter what, but I wasn't sure if that still applied. Was it my place to step in now? Michael had made it clear he didn't value my opinion, didn't even value me. And yet, he was still my son, The internal war raged day after day. One part of me said, let him face the consequences, he's grown. He chose this life, this pride, this path. Another part whispered, he's still your boy. The same child who used to bring you flowers from the yard, who once looked at you like you hung the stars. I took long walks to quiet my thoughts. The leaves had begun to turn, rust and gold fluttering down the sidewalks. Families walked hand in hand, laughter spilling into the crisp air, and I found myself aching for what I used to have. At the grocery store, I overheard two women talking near the canned goods. One mentioned a foreclosure sale happening soon on the edge of town. My pulse quickened. Could it be Michael's home? I didn't dare ask. I went home and opened the safe again. The manila envelope lay where I had left it, the deed inside still crisp under its age. I studied it as though the words could offer guidance. The lakeside cabin, my inheritance, my secret. I thought about selling it. The money might be enough to give Michael a second chance, but then fear gripped me. If I offered it, would he even accept it? Or would he see it as another example of me meddling, proof that I couldn't stay out of his life? And if he took it, would it actually save him or simply fuel more of his reckless habits? Late one night, unable to sleep, I sat in bed with the locket pressed to my lips. I imagined David there, his hand resting over mine, his steady gaze urging me to hold on. The little key inside the locket glimmered faintly in the lamplight. It was just a trinket, a symbol, yet somehow it felt alive in that moment, an omen of decisions yet to come. I tucked the deed back into the safe and closed it firmly. For now, I would wait and watch. I told myself Michael had to reach for me, had to recognize that sometimes the people you call useless are the very ones holding the tools to save you. But deep inside, I knew. The storm was already gathering, and when it finally broke, I would be the one standing in its path. The call came on a Friday evening, just as the sun was slipping behind the trees, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. I almost didn't answer. Michael's name lit up my phone, and my first instinct was to let it ring out, to protect myself from more disappointment. But something, mother's intuition perhaps, made me press accept. Mom? His voice was different. Weak, stripped of its usual confidence. Yes, Michael, I'm here. For a moment there was only silence, broken by a shaky breath on the other end. Then he said, I don't know how to say this. The bank, they're foreclosing on the house. My heart clenched, though I tried to keep my tone steady. Foreclosing? Michael, what do you mean? I mean, he swallowed hard. I can't keep up with the mortgage. The payments are behind. They've given us notice. If I don't come up with the money soon, we'll lose everything. I closed my eyes, the image of Claire's handbags for sale, the angry voices Lily had overheard all snapping into place. Mrs. Patterson's whispers, the foreclosure talk at the grocery store. It was true. Michael's words tumbled out faster now, laced with desperation. Mom, I didn't want to tell you. I thought I could fix it. But I can't. I need help. His voice cracked on the last word, pride breaking like glass. For a long moment, I didn't answer. I sat with the phone pressed to my ear, staring at the quiet room around me. The ticking clock, the cooling cup of tea on the table, the locket at my throat, it all felt too still compared to the storm in my chest. Help? I said softly. Yes, money. Anything. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious. They're going to take the house, Mom. Claire, the kids, everything we've worked for will be gone. The irony struck me so hard I nearly laughed. A month ago, I was useless. Now, I was his last hope. I touched the locket, running my thumb over the tiny key hidden inside. David's words echoed in my mind. You hold the key to Michael's future. Was this what he meant? Had he known, somehow, that there would come a day when Michael would turn back to me, humbled, broken? My throat tightened. Michael, I began, choosing my words carefully, do you remember what you said to me the last time we spoke? There was a pause, then a low groan. Mom, please, don't bring that up now. I didn't mean it. I was angry, but you said it, I reminded him, my voice calm but steady. In front of your wife. In front of your children. You called me useless. The line went quiet. I could almost hear his shame traveling through the static. I'm sorry, he whispered at last. I should never have said that. You've done more for me than anyone. But please, Mom, I don't know where else to turn. My heart ached. Every part of me wanted to reach through the phone and gather him into my arms like I used to when he was a little boy. But another part of me remembered the sting of his words, the years of being dismissed, the way Claire's eyes skimmed over me like I was invisible. Michael, I said, exhaling slowly, I need time to think. Time? His voice wavered. We don't have time. The notice says 30 days, maybe less. I understand, I replied. But I can't give you an answer tonight. He let out a shaky breath, one I recognized from his childhood when he tried not to cry. Please, Mom. Just don't give up on me. I won't, I said gently. Good night, Michael. After the call ended, I sat in the stillness, my hand gripping the locket so tightly it left an imprint in my palm. The deed to the cabin waited in the safe, silent, but powerful. For years, it had been just a relic of the past. Now, it might be the only thing standing between Michael and ruin. But I couldn't shake the thought, if I saved him now, would he truly change? Or would I only be fueling the same pride that had nearly destroyed him? The choice loomed heavy, pressing down on me like a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. The days after Michael's call were some of the hardest I've known, not because of the decision itself, but because of the constant tug-of-war inside my chest. Each morning, I woke with the same question pressing down on me. Do I help him, or do I let him face the consequences? I tried to keep my hands busy to quiet my thoughts. I dusted every corner of the house, polished silverware I hadn't used in years, and even took down the curtains to wash them, though they hardly needed it. Still, no matter how many chores I piled on myself, the silence of my little house echoed with his voice, desperate and cracking. Mom, I need help. A part of me wanted to march straight to his home, to cradle his face in my hands and assure him I would fix everything. But another part, the part still stung by his words, "You're useless," whispered, "Let him learn, let him feel what you felt all these years." 3 days after the call, I ran into Claire at the grocery store. She was standing in the baking aisle, staring at a box of generic cake mix like she'd never bought one before. Her hair wasn't styled, and her makeup couldn't quite hide the dark circles under her eyes. "Ellie," she said flatly, as though she'd been caught doing something shameful. "Claire," I replied, polite but cool. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she blurted out, "Michael told you, didn't he?" I nodded. Her shoulders sagged. "He didn't want to, but I told him he had to. We're drowning. He thought he could juggle everything, but it's too much. The mortgage, the credit cards, the car payments. I told him this image he's clinging to would ruin us." Her eyes flicked toward the shelves, glassy with unshed tears. "And now it has." I wanted to feel vindicated, but all I felt was tired. Tired of watching my son pretend to be someone he wasn't. Tired of being treated as less while I silently held the answers they might one day beg for. "Claire," I said carefully, "why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her lips trembled, but her pride was intact. "Because it's not your problem. You've done enough." The words sounded kind, but there was steel beneath them. She didn't want my involvement, not really. She wanted my silence and maybe my wallet. We parted ways without saying much more. But as I carried my groceries to the car, the decision grew heavier. That night, Michael called again. His voice was more urgent this time. "Mom, the bank is sending people next week to assess the property. I need to show them we can make a payment. Just one. Please, do you have anything?" "Anything at all?" I sat in my chair with the locket warm against my skin. I thought about the cabin deed, about selling it quickly, maybe even mortgaging it. It could be enough to buy him time, but would it really solve anything? "Michael," I said softly, "what happens if I help you now? What's the plan after that?" He hesitated. "I'll figure it out. I'll find another job. I'll cut expenses," I interrupted, my voice firmer than I intended. "That's not a plan. That's hope. You need more than hope." The silence that followed was thick. When he finally spoke, his words were sharp. "So you're just going to let me lose everything?" I didn't say that, I replied, steady but aching. I'm saying I need to know you've learned something. That this isn't just me throwing a lifeline while you keep drilling holes in the boat. He groaned in frustration. Mom, this isn't the time for lectures. No, I said quietly. It's the exact time. He hung up shortly after, leaving me staring at the blinking screen. I pressed the locket to my lips, feeling the little key inside, wondering if David would think I was being cruel or wise. The following days, tension built like a storm cloud. Claire stopped answering my calls. Lily, sweet, innocent Lily, left a voicemail on my phone. Grandma, Daddy's mad all the time. Mommy cries. I wish you could come. Her small voice cracked something inside me. I walked to the safe again and pulled out the deed. The paper seemed to weigh more with each passing day. I laid it flat on the table, imagining the cabin, the peeling paint, the smell of pine, the quiet lake. My parents had worked hard to keep it, and now here I was, deciding whether to trade it away for my son's mistakes. Sleep abandoned me. I would lie awake, replaying the argument where he called me useless, the shame on his face during his desperate call, the worry in Lily's little voice. I wanted to believe helping him would heal our fractured bond, but I also feared it would only deepen the cracks. On the 7th day after his first call, Michael showed up at my door. He looked older, defeated. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. Mom, he said, voice hoarse, I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside, letting him in. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had spread out the deeds so many times. His eyes darted toward the envelope on the counter, though he didn't mention it. I need you, he whispered. I know I hurt you. I know what I said was unforgivable, but please don't let my kids lose their home. For the first time in years, I saw my son stripped of his armor, vulnerable and broken. And yet, the wound his words had carved into me still throbbed. I folded my hands, staring at the locket around my neck. The little key pressed against my chest like it was urging me to speak. I'll think about it, I said finally. But Michael, if I do this, everything changes. No more secrets, no more pretending. We do this together, or not at all. He nodded quickly, almost desperately. Together. I promise. But promises are easy when you're desperate. I needed to see if he meant it. Michael stayed that night. He didn't ask, and I didn't offer. But when he slumped forward at the kitchen table and pressed his forehead into his folded arms, I couldn't bring myself to send him away. I draped a blanket over his shoulders, the same one he used to curl under as a boy during thunderstorms. For the first time in years, he looked small again, fragile, not invincible. I didn't sleep. I sat in my armchair with the deed spread before me, the locket clutched in my hand, and David's memory whispering through the quiet. What would you do? I asked my late husband in the silence. Would you hand it over freely, or would you make him earn it? By dawn, I knew. When Michael stirred awake, blinking groggily at the morning sun filtering through my curtains, I was ready. I placed the deed in front of him, flat and deliberate. His eyes widened, recognition flashing instantly. The cabin, he breathed. You still have it? Of course I still have it, I said softly. It's been in my family for decades. Your father loved that place. I kept it safe all these years for you or for Lily one day. But now? I trailed off, watching his expression shift from wonder to calculation. Mom, if we sell it, we could pay off the arrears, maybe even some of the credit cards. His voice quickened, hungry, desperate. This could solve everything. No, I said firmly, cutting him off. It won't solve everything. It might buy you time. But Michael, this is not a gift. If I help you, it comes with conditions. His brow furrowed, frustration already simmering. Conditions? Mom, this is my family's home we're talking about. My kids' lives are on the line. And you're setting rules? Yes, I replied, steel in my tone. Because if I don't, this will all happen again. I need your word, not just words, your commitment that you'll change. Change what? He snapped. Everything, I said, my voice breaking. The way you spend, the way you treat Claire, the way you talk to me. I swallowed hard, remembering that cruel, shattering word. You called me useless, Michael. Do you know what that did to me? After I spent my life raising you, protecting you, keeping you afloat when your father died, you reduced me to nothing in front of my grandchildren." He winced, his jaw tightening. "I was angry. I didn't mean it. But you said it," I whispered. "And deep down, you believed it. That's what hurts the most." The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Finally, he slumped back in the chair, running both hands over his face. His voice cracked. "You're right. I've been awful. To you, to Claire, to everyone. I wanted so badly to prove I was successful, that I was better than ordinary. And now look where it's gotten me." His eyes glistened. "I don't deserve your help." For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I reached for the locket around my neck, undoing the clasp with trembling fingers. I set it on the table between us. "This locket has a key," I said softly. "Your father gave it to me the year before he passed. He said it would unlock something important when the time came. I never knew what he meant until now." Michael picked it up gently, almost reverently. "What does it open?" I slid the deed across the table, a safe deposit box at the bank. "Inside is the original will, the deed, and a small account your father left behind. It isn't much, but combined with the cabin, it could help. But only if you're willing to face reality." He stared at me, torn between gratitude and shame. His lips trembled. "You'd really give this up? For me?" I took a deep breath. "For you, yes, but not for the man who called me useless. For the boy I raised, the one who hugged me after school every day, the one who cried when his father died and promised me he'd take care of me one day." My voice cracked. "If that boy still exists, then yes. I'll do this." Michael's head dropped into his hands. I heard him sob quietly, a sound I hadn't heard since he was little. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like his mother again. But the confrontation wasn't over. Later that afternoon, Claire arrived unannounced. She stepped into my house, eyes sharp, lips pressed thin. "Michael told me," she said without greeting. "About the cabin." I nodded, bracing myself. She crossed her arms. "I won't let you throw your future away for us. He made this mess. He needs to clean it up." Her bluntness startled me, but beneath her anger I saw exhaustion. She was fighting the same battle, just from another front. "Claire," I said gently, "sometimes cleaning up means accepting help, but it has to be help with strings attached. Do you understand?" She stared at me, then at Michael, who stood awkwardly in the corner, wringing his hands. "Do you understand?" she demanded at him. "If your mother does this, you change. No more pretending, no more lying. We sell the fancy car. We move if we have to. Because I'm not raising these kids in chaos anymore." Michael nodded quickly, his voice hoarse. "I know. I promise." But Claire wasn't done. She turned back to me, her eyes narrowing. "And what about you, Ellie? What do you want out of this? Because if you hand over that cabin, you're giving up the last piece of your own security. What do you expect in return?" The question hung heavy. What did I want? Forgiveness? Respect? Love? Finally, I answered, my voice low but unwavering. "I want my son back. I want my grandchildren to know me, not to think of me as a nuisance in the corner. And I want to be treated like I matter, because I do." For once, Claire didn't argue. She just looked at me with something like respect. The three of us sat around that table for hours, hashing out details. They would sell the second car. They would cut expenses, make a strict budget. Michael would attend counseling for his spending habits and his temper. Claire agreed to go with him. And I would open that safe deposit box. As the sun set, casting golden light across the kitchen, I placed the locket back in Michael's hand. "You'll need this key tomorrow," I said. "Don't lose it. It's more than just a piece of metal. It's trust." His eyes filled again. He clutched it tightly, nodding. "I won't, Mom. I swear." That night, after they left, I finally let the tears come, not tears of weakness, but of release. For years I had carried the weight of being invisible, dismissed, useless. But in that confrontation, in finally demanding to be heard, I had reclaimed something I didn't know I'd lost, my worth. And though the outcome wasn't certain, for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. The next morning dawned cold and clear, the kind of morning where the air felt sharper, more awake. I stood in front of the bank doors with Michael at my side, the locket warm in his palm. He kept turning it over between his fingers as though afraid it would vanish if he blinked. Inside, the clerk recognized me immediately. I had been paying the rental fees for that deposit box for over 30 years. She led us to the small private room where the steel drawer was set into the wall. Michael slid the tiny key into the lock, his hand trembling, and with a soft click, the box slid free. He looked at me. "Do you want to open it?" I shook my head. "No, Michael. Your father left this for you as much as for me. You open it." With careful hands, he lifted the lid. Inside lay the folded deed, an envelope yellowed with age, and a small leather pouch tied with string. Michael opened the envelope first. It was David's handwriting. I knew it instantly. For Ellie and for our boy. Michael cleared his throat, reading aloud. "If you're opening this, it means life has tested you harder than you thought it would. Ellie, I trust your wisdom. Michael, if you're reading this, know that your mother's love will always be your greatest inheritance. This box holds something practical, yes, but its true worth is in reminding you where you come from and the family that stands behind you." Michael's voice cracked. He pressed the letter to his chest, tears glistening in his eyes. The pouch contained a modest sum, less than I had imagined after so many years, but still significant enough to make a dent in their troubles. Combined with the cabin, it would keep the bank from taking everything. But it wasn't the money that mattered in that room. It was David's words echoing through decades, bridging the gap between past and present, father and son, mother and child. Michael looked at me, overwhelmed. He knew. He knew I'd need this. "No," I said gently. "He knew we'd both need it. That's why he left it the way he did, to remind us we're stronger together." The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, hard conversations, and choices Michael had long avoided. The luxury car went first, then the vacation membership. Claire sold her designer purses, some with tears in her eyes, but also with a strange relief. The children, surprisingly, adapted faster than the adults. Lily laughed when she discovered they'd be moving to a smaller rental house. "It's closer to Grandma's anyway," she said brightly, as if that erased the loss. In a way, it did. For me, transformation came in smaller, quieter steps. Michael called me every day, sometimes just to tell me what bill he'd paid, other times to ask what I thought about a decision. At first, I wondered if it was guilt driving him, a desperate attempt to prove himself. But as days turned into weeks, the calls changed. They weren't about money anymore. They were about recipes, about childhood memories, about whether I remembered the neighbor's dog that used to chase him to the bus stop. It felt like getting my son back piece by piece, like watching him shed layers of pride and shame until only the boy I once knew remained. Claire, too, softened. She invited me over for dinner one evening, her tone hesitant but sincere. When I arrived, the table was set simply, without extravagance, and she poured me tea before serving herself. That small gesture spoke louder than words. For years, I had felt like an unwelcome guest in her home. Now, for the first time, I felt like family. The cabin was sold by spring. Signing over the papers was harder than I expected. That lakeside place held years of memories. David teaching Michael how to fish, Lily building sandcastles on the shore. It wasn't just wood and nails, it was a piece of us. But as I handed the keys to the new owners, I realized something. Letting go didn't erase the memories. They lived on, not bound to the walls of a cabin, but stitched into us. The money cleared their debts. They weren't wealthy anymore, not by any stretch, but they were free from creditors, free from the crushing weight of appearances, free to start again. And in that freedom, something bloomed between us. Michael came to me one evening, late, after the children were in bed. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, just like the morning of the confrontation, but this time his posture was different, softer. "Mom," he said, his voice quiet, "I need to tell you something. When I called you useless, it wasn't just anger. It was fear. I was drowning, and I hated myself for it. Taking it out on you was the easiest thing to do, and the cruelest. I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "Regret is only heavy if you don't use it. Let it guide you." Don't bury it. His eyes filled again. You've always been stronger than me. No, I whispered. I just never stopped believing in you, even when you gave me every reason to. Months later, on my 60th birthday, Michael surprised me. He gathered the family in their small but cheerful rental house, and when the cake was served, he handed me a small box. Inside was the locket. My locket. But now, the key had been replaced with a new one, bright and modern. It opens something different now, he said with a shy smile. I looked at him questioningly. The kids and I fixed up the old shed in the backyard, he explained, turned it into a little studio for you. A place for your sewing or reading or whatever you want. We thought it was time you had something that was yours. My throat closed, emotion overwhelming me. The locket was no longer just a relic of the past. It was a bridge to the present, carrying David's memory into this new chapter. For the first time in decades, I felt not like a burden, but like someone cherished. Needed. Useful in the truest sense of the word. Transformation didn't come overnight. There were setbacks, arguments, tight months when money stretched thin. But the difference now was how they faced those storms, together. Honestly, without hiding behind false pride. And me? I found myself laughing more. Visiting the children's school events. Cooking Sunday dinners where Claire and I worked side by side. The tension that had once thickened every airspace between us slowly thinned, replaced with a fragile, hopeful peace. Most of all, I learned something about myself. I had spent years equating my worth with how others treated me, shrinking under their dismissals. But when I finally demanded to be seen, when I finally said I matter, the world shifted. Not because Michael changed, though he did, but because I did. And that was the truest inheritance David left us. Not money, not property, but the reminder that strength isn't in holding everything together silently. It's in speaking when your voice shakes, in loving even when love is tested, in choosing to believe in redemption when bitterness would be easier. On quiet evenings now, I sit in my little studio, sunlight pouring through the small window, the locket resting against my heart. I run my thumb over the new key, smiling. David gave me the first one years ago to unlock something we didn't yet understand. Michael gave me the second, not to replace it, but to continue it. And I, at last, found the door it opened. One leading not to a cabin or a bank vault, but to a family restored, a life transformed. When I look back now, it feels almost surreal. A single word, useless, once carved through me deeper than any wound. I thought it was the end of my worth, the final proof that I had become invisible in the life I had poured myself into. But in the strangest way, it was the beginning. Because sometimes life forces you into silence, into walking away, into sitting with your own broken heart, before you can hear what it's been trying to tell you all along. You matter, even when others don't see it. Michael still stumbles. He's still proud at times, still quick to frustration, but he's learning. And for the first time, I can watch without rushing to fix it for him. I can simply be there, a presence, not a crutch. That's the balance I never understood before. And Claire, well, she and I are not best friends, but we are allies now. We cook together, we laugh sometimes, and when she brushes past me in the kitchen, it no longer feels like an intrusion, but like family. That small change has been a gift, but the greatest transformation has been within myself. I no longer shrink when I speak. I no longer swallow the ache just to keep the peace. I've learned that setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's the purest form of love, because without them, love gets twisted into servitude and dignity quietly dies. Every time I hold the locket, I'm reminded, one key opened a vault filled with the past, and another opened a door into a new future. The real treasure was never the money or the cabin. It was the lesson hidden beneath it all, that strength comes not from holding on, but from knowing when to let go. So here I am, 60 years old, not broken, not useless, transformed. And if you've ever been made to feel small, invisible, discarded by the very people you sacrificed for, I want you to know this. Your worth has never been determined by their words. Sometimes the journey to rediscovering it is painful, but it is always worth it. Because on the other side of humiliation, of heartbreak, of silence, waits something you might not expect, freedom. If Ellie's journey touched you, if you saw even a reflection of your own battles in her story, don't let it stop here. This channel is about more than just storytelling. It's about connection, about giving voice to the moments we're often too afraid to say aloud. Every comment you leave, every story you share, becomes part of this space where none of us have to feel alone. If you've ever been called less than, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from someone else's cruelty, tell us. Your story might be the hand someone else is reaching for tonight. And if you want to hear more stories like Ellie's, stories of heartbreak, resilience, transformation, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell, and stay with me. Because every week I'll be right here, telling the stories we carry in silence until someone finally speaks them. Together, we'll make sure those voices are never lost again.